So hi everyone, I'm Jeff. I'm going to help kick off the feeding therapy session here. So we've got Michelle and Loren from Open Door Pediatric Therapy. So they're going to tell us a little bit about what they do and how they can probably provide some information. And I think we're going to have some time for Q&A afterwards.
Yep, perfect.
All right.
Lots of questions after. All right. Well, welcome. So we'll begin by going over what is feeding therapy. So feeding therapy, we can look at two different avenues. The first avenue we look at is the musculature. So you're talking about your jaw muscles. Are you able to have the strength to chew? Your teeth alignment. Do you have the mechanics in place for you to have an organized microphone? Sorry about that. Do you have your teeth aligned to be able to do that rotary chew, to just piecemeal the food and get a bolus, which is the fancy word for a clump of food, together in your mouth? Do you have the tongue coordination to move everything around? All of those are really important pieces that need to work separately, but also together to be able to chew. And then do you have the involuntary response at the back of your throat? So when the food gets to a certain point that you initially swallow, does that need to be triggered? And so sometimes the disorder is in the front of the mouth. Sometimes it's in the back of the mouth, and sometimes it's all over and it's both. So one of our jobs as feeding therapists is to really diagnose if there's any part of the mechanic and what parts of those three working together or not working together that we can look to remediate. And then there's 3 different ways that this can be deficient or that needs improvement. The coordination, so just those 3 things working together, or maybe there's just some weakness. So they're working together, but maybe the musculature is a little bit weak, but you're still able to chew and swallow. And then the range of motion. So that is more of a presentation when there might be something wrong with the tongue being a little bit too tight or the structures.
Anatomically being shorter, like you can't stick your tongue out all the way, you can't move it to your molars back and forth.
Right.
So.
Yep. So that is one whole component of feeding therapy is the mechanics. And then the second part is the sensory component of feeding. So this would be when kiddos might have some issues or difficulties with certain textures, certain temperatures. They like smushy, they like soft, or they don't like smushy, they don't like soft, hot, cold, mixed textures.
So they prefer a brown diet, as we call it, and they just want things that always consistently taste the same. So we also work on the sensory component of feeding as well to increase variety in their diet.
Yep. And some of these feelings are too much, and some of them are not enough. So they might have the crunchy is just too much of a feeling, or the softness is too much of a feeling, or they don't really have a lot of the feeling. So that's what's causing them to not.
Yeah, they don't know where the food is in their mouth, so they're not able to put it in the right place for the swallow to initiate.
And we call that under-responsive or over-responsive. And then to further make things tricky, they can be both of those, like under-responsive with the tongue, but over-responsive with the musculature. So it is an interesting little formula that we have to look at all of the different components and put them together to figure out when your little has some issues feeding, what of all of those.
Yep. And oftentimes that oral motor component can lead to sensory components.
Exactly.
So we're working on those both simultaneously and looking at, well, can they chew the food? Okay, now, do they want to chew the food? Does it feel okay in their mouth, or does it feel like a really, really big feeling or too small of a feeling?
Perfect. I should give you the microphone when you're speaking. And then next slide.
I can do that. Am I in the wrong place?
Go. Am I supposed to be doing something up here? Yay. The next one is signs when to seek services. So Loren and I decided, or we came up with a list of the most common things that when our kiddos seek services. So it includes feeding when you're choking or gagging and vomiting when you're eating. That one is one of the most obvious ones. Or when you are a picky eater, or we call it a rigid food preference. So those are your kiddos who carbs are their best friend, or A certain texture is their best friend. Our underweight population. When a kiddo comes in and they are low birth weight or low range for their age, this is one of the first things we look at is there something mechanically that's going on that food is just it's so effortful to eat, so we are just not having enough caloric intake. Then we have, if you are a tube feeder or you have to do some supplements, that is one of the criteria. And then we have, if you're having difficulty chewing and swallowing, or if you're getting tired during feeds, specifically babies that sleep a lot when they're beyond that newborn phase, it's one of our telltales that there might be some feeding difficulties because it's so much energy when they're that tiny little human to feed that they sleep a lot.
Yep, and when we have that low tone, then we're expending more energy to actually chew the food, and then are more tired and expending more calories and not getting as much nutrition because it takes so much energy to chew it or even swallow it. And so really working on strength in those situations I know is in this population important.
And then the kiddo refusing to eat or drink. So this is the turning of the head, which might look behavioral at first, but often there's a root cause of it that is usually a mechanical reason that they're doing that. Or if they have difficulty eating in certain situations. So think of your kiddos who need the iPad right in front of them to sustain attention because it's so difficult. They need that super reinforcer just to maintain their time at the table. And then parents and caregivers feeling stressed or overwhelmed during meal times. Feeding is a very emotional and social component of life, and so it's a really important part of
That's one of the biggest reasons to get services. If you are overwhelmed as a parent or caregiver, then you know best with, mommy heart or just parent heart that something's wrong, and to come and see us, come get feeding therapy somewhere.
Okay, our objectives for feeding therapy. Sorry, my slide's kind of tiny. Our main objective is to increase awareness to the mouth, bring that awareness in there. And we can also use this when we're trying to facilitate or to help reduce drooling. And then we have the strengthening of the oral musculature, all of those three pieces I was talking about earlier, like really getting them strong so you're setting them up to be a successful chewer and eater. And then we'd like to improve the coordination of your oral structures, and you can do this with repetitive motor planning, you can do this with stimulation, and this is the second component if you are one of the parents who want to help with drooling. Improving your coordination specifically of your lips and tongues help back those musculatures, and then you can reduce some drooling. And then recalibrating your sensory system in your mouth. For those over and under responsive kiddos, we need to recalibrate the new normal so when they are eating and drinking, they are processing it. And then we do systematic desensitization to novel textures. And this is a fun one because we do a lot of play-based therapy in feeding therapy. A lot of water play, cold things, ice.
Yeah, my favorite is we do a lot of mouth basketballs into the trash can, just getting kiddos to put things in their mouth if they're not willing to even try or bring things to their face. We splatter paint on the walls and we color with different foods and just have a bunch of fun so that they're touching it and then getting to feel it at least in their hands and then eventually their mouth.
When we do feeding therapy, there's 32 steps to feeding, and the last one is putting it in your mouth. So a lot of it is being around the food and having a positive or neutral, we're good with neutral, a positive or neutral relationship with any type of food product. And it is definitely a dance, a dance to get to that with a lot of kiddos, but it's really fun, so it's very playful. And then we also have really cool tools that we use that vibrate in some capacity or have different textures on them that we play with, and they are shaped like a monster and shaped like a little Mickey Mouse, unicorn. So it's fun. Yep. And then one of our huge goals is to improve safety during meals. We don't want any aspiration. We don't want any regurgitation. and we want to create a variety in your diet. We know that, you know, it's hard when your kiddo is chicken nuggets and french fries or one specific thing is a safe food. And so being able to have an improved variety is probably one of the top goals for caregivers.
Yep. Agreed.
You want to go for this one?
Sure, I can do this one. So some things that we really use in feeding therapy to help our NBIA population specifically are first just looking at the whole child approach. We found that when we are targeting every part of their sensory system, then we get the best response. So if we're only focusing on giving them like an auditory cue, then it is harder for them to do the task. So if I say like, take a bite, they might just keep their mouth open. But if I show them with the visual cue and tell them, so I'm eating as well, and then I put the cracker near their mouth or put a pretzel near their mouth and give them a tactile cue as well to bite down, then they're more likely to engage in that activity and then practice or get the exposure to what we would like in therapy. And that goes for across language therapy as well.
Right.
We're always looking for the way to stimulate the brain in the most global way. So we do a lot of singing in feeding therapy. We are trying to stimulate their left hemisphere and the right hemisphere of their brain and just trying to integrate them as a whole body approach and globally. And then number one, especially with drooling remediation, would be oral awareness. So we do a lot of oral awareness techniques, and our go-to is usually vibration. So we're using vibration on the lips and in the cheeks. We recommend to parents using like a vibrating toothbrush, making sure they're just aware of where their articulators are in their mouth, where their tongue is, where their teeth are, and especially cheeks, because I notice some kiddos that are having a hard time chewing, they just put it in their cheek and then they keep it there. So when we bring awareness to those areas, they know what's going on and they're able to move their tongue to the side and swallow it. But on top of it, if we're looking at the whole child approach, we do more than just the vibration. We do a lot of different feelings. So sometimes I bring out cotton balls or feathers or cold stimulation, as well as corduroy. There's a whole many steps that you can do and make a sensory diet for an individual child, what's really bringing awareness for them. But vibration's normally our first step. And then the next is repeated exposure to the targeted task. So it's not just going to take one time of putting the toothbrush in their mouth. It's probably going to be longer amounts of time, probably a minute of stimulating their mouth, if not 2, and then doing that, you know, daily so that they can gain those skills rather than just doing it once. And
for NBIA specifically, we're fighting demyelination, sorry. So what you and I perceive as touch, they might need maybe 10 times stronger to give the same reception. And so really giving that extra input, that stronger input to get the same message across as their neurotypical peer is really a key component specifically with this population. Mm-hmm. Do you agree?
Yes, absolutely.
And the repetitive component of it as well.
Yeah.
Oh, sorry.
You're good. And then we can scale up or down based off of the response because like she said with the demyelinization, we can go like, oh, I don't think they're getting this task, so I need to take it down one level so they can be successful and then move up to the next level. So when we were putting this presentation together, I think I gave the example of like, if I'm having a child try to chew a pretzel rod for jaw strength, I might give them the pretzel if they're able to bring it to their mouth independently, or I might put the pretzel in their mouth, and if they just keep their mouth open, then that's not appropriate. So I might need to get out the Z-Vibe, the vibration tool, and wake up that part of their mouth. And then if that doesn't work, I need to, you know, give them a cue on their jaw, massage their temple, their jaw, and then go to something that's a non-food item that they can chew on, like a straw, or we have chewy tubes, so they can practice that motion before they're doing it with food. And then the next technique that really helps with all of those things are postural control. Yeah. So if you think about when you're sitting on a bar stool and your feet are up and it's really uncomfortable, it's just hard to eat. It's because your core is working extra hard to be engaged, but when your feet are on the floor, you can engage your core better, and therefore you have the strength to eat, because the core is your powerhouse for everything, and that includes eating. So a lot of the times with motor difficulties, these kids are slunched over like this, or they're sitting a little even slouched under in the chair. And when that's happening, it's extra hard for them to chew. So we will show a slide about the 90-90-90 position, that we really want them upright, and that's giving them support with pillows or blankets or anything that you have, towels on their sides and on their back so that they're upright. And then that their feet are on the floor, their ankles are at 90 degrees, and their knees are at 90 degrees, just like we would be sitting in a chair. And then when their core is engaged, they're usually able to do the task a lot more quickly, a lot more efficiently, and gain that strength.
All interconnected.
Yeah, do you have anything else to add?
We have something about interoceptive, proprioceptive, and vestibular movements. So back to the whole child. You can.
Okay.
This is your pot.
Okay, so similarly with postural control, we have interoception and proprioception, which are senses that aren't often talked about because we really just think of like hearing, seeing, tasting as our senses. But interoception is where your body is in space, and that actually really matters too, because if you don't know where the food is, you don't know where the spoon is, you don't know where your mouth is, then it's extra hard to eat. So we do a lot of things to also wake up those systems, which we talked about in the whole child approach a lot, and then as well with proprioception. So we have a future slide on things that you can do to wake up and to integrate the proprioceptive and interoceptive systems before you eat if there are difficult times eating. Okay.
So, yeah, it's interesting to think that we might go to swing gym and do some spinning or swinging to facilitate better success in feeding therapy, but absolutely, when we talk about treating the whole child, that is, there's methods to our madness on things that might not appear as feeding therapy that are very, very important.
All the time.
Yeah.
Like when I have kiddos with NBIA sitting in front of me and I can just see that they are, spending more time processing those directions that I'm telling them in food school, then I'm like, let's just take a break, let's go swing, let's go try to get their body moving so that it can integrate their brain to move quicker as well, and then I get a lot more success when we go to feeding therapy.
The next one is about lip closure.
But I can't get it.
No, Alexa's slide.
I don't know what I'm doing wrong. I don't know. Am I pointing at the wrong place?
Is it just us?
It's down. There you go. Thank you. Okay. So some activities, we target lip closure often in kids with NBIA because of that drooling and that open mouth posture. So we do a lot of things to strengthen those lips and close them to help with the drooling, because that's the number one difficulty we're seeing. A lot of the times they'll want y'all to get on medication or things like that for the drooling, and so we'd like to help a little with that. Some things that you can do at home are using straws to drink, especially like thinner soda straws to drink. They'll want to go in with their teeth often. Even I sometimes drink with my teeth, but pay attention next time you're drinking with a straw that you're really supposed to be using your lips. Right. And that little tight, sucking motion with making our lips a really tiny circle takes a lot of strength. So we have a whole hierarchy that is about 7 or 8 straws that are just silly different twirly straws and silly straws that make it harder to express the liquid, and it takes more strength. So we work on strengthening that lip through straws. We do.
Feeding therapists love straws. You don't really think about it when you're just drinking out of a straw, but there's so much tongue movement in the base of tongue strength that it's more than just the lips, and that is another way we can, when I was talking about coordination of those mechanisms together, this is an easy way for us to work on those two.
Yep.
Oh, obviously bubbles. Even I love bubbles. Everybody loves bubbles. So we also have a bubble hierarchy of how we can work on lip rounding, lip closure, awareness to lips with bubbles. And bubbles, I don't know what it is about bubbles, but bubbles, they're just the best. They're magical.
That really increases participation when you take out bubbles. They're like, okay. We do a lot of kissing bubbles too for that lip awareness. So they have to go rather than, sometimes they'll try to eat it, but then eventually, when you practice enough, they start going, and that's really, really strengthening.
Yep. And it's fun for us too, because we just get to play with bubbles. Holding a tongue depressor in the lips for an extended time.
Yep. So similar with straw, it has to be without teeth. You're just holding it like this, not like that. Holding it like this. Sometimes we even put pennies on the side for some extra weight and holding it closed. It's very hard. But as you can see, there's lots of different lip closure activities that we do in therapy, as well as horns, another hierarchy that we have. And same with the vibration or bumpy textures to lips.
Yeah.
There you go. Oh, you can do this one.
Here's the postural control we were talking about. So we always, if we're doing a motor planning activity, we try to start with a sensory activity. So your sensory activity innervates all of those neurons, gets the body awake, and then we move to the, now that they're awake and extra aware, then we move to the motor planning. So that is a very, very good, on any aspect of motor planning for you to do. And if your kiddos are in OT, you'll probably see them brushing before they do a motor planning activity of anything with their fine motor, or maybe even PT. Yeah. Same thing, they'll put the vibrating tool on their legs before they're working on gait training. The same principle, innervating all of those neurons before you move to the motor planning activity. Yep. And here's our little look at her in the 90-90 over there. And then there's some activities to wake up your body before feeding, like we were talking about, the swinging tug of war at home. Sometimes I'll say put some items into a pillowcase and just, drag it across the living room. You have to be creative in some of the things that you can do. Wall push-ups, that's an easy one to do. Just push up on a wall. There you go. Yay, look at us, got some exercise. Obstacle courses.
Yeah.
Talk about motivating. They love that one.
Obstacle courses are great because you can really pare it down or really pare it up. So even if it's, just having a bigger step, that's something that's really helpful for the body. So just putting an obstacle in the way, but then you can have a whole obstacle course where they're stepping on different stepping stones, going around things. We make a lot of different obstacle courses just based off of what the child needs. But we get really creative. I think a lot of couch cushions would be involved in the house, a lot of pillows, even different colored things, even rugs on the floor. It can be walking across different textures with shoes off, things like that. Oh, and then we have wheelbarrow walking, which is a very tough one, and then tug of war and scooter board on your belly, as well as bear crawls. So all of those are really heavy work, and any heavy work helps wake up the body. So just some ideas.
Yeah. And then also the heavy work increases satiety. If you think about like a day when you were little and you were at, swimming all day and you came and you were just like, I could eat so much. Same principle. So, any activity with heavy work just increases satiety as well. And then I think that is, now we have some resources that we included. Yeah. At Open Door, we do the SOS sensory approach, but we also have Feeding Matters, which is...
Feeding Matters just offers a lot of support for families. They have that link has a lot of resources, and then there's this family guide as well on there that goes over feeding therapy and just really anything that you could need. I think they even have groups and support that,
And ASHA is our governing body, that they always have a lot of great resources. They're really good to us.
Yep, that's helpful for if you need to know when to seek therapy. They have all of the things that we do that you might not think like, oh, a speech therapist would do that. ASHA has all of the things that we target in feeding therapy. Okay. And our last slide is just any questions, any specific cases that you want to ask. Yeah. Oh.
Yes, we are. Okay.
However, we saw she started oral motor therapy.
Okay.
Is there a difference in feeding therapy and oral motor therapy? Yes, oral motor therapy is a great prerequisite skill for feeding therapy. Feeding therapy is more use of the foods and really working on that dysphagia part of it. So the oral motor is going to strengthen, like we talked about at the beginning, and then yes, exactly. So that's why we're working on stimulating her muscles. Yep. Like her cheek muscles and things like that, because she was diagnosed with something else, or oropharyngeal dysphagia. And dysphagia, so I think it's two different things. Is it true? It's the same, it's just different parts. So this is the oral and this is the pharyngeal. So oral phase is everything that's until your base of tongue, until the back of your tongue, and then pharyngeal's down. Okay. Yeah. So that's where we're at. So we're getting oral motor therapy for her right now. So I'm still looking for a feeding therapist. Great. And with insurance, it's kind of the same for them. So we have to be specific because it's still kind of OT related. So yes. Told me that it has for them to be able to kind of, it had to be specific. You guys had to be specific in what it is for them to be able, because it's under OT or something. Yes, because OTs do that sensory part that we talked about, but not as much the oral motor part. The actual swallow muscles is what we focus on, and what we had to take in our graduate programs. We had to take classes on the dysphagia part and know all of the little tiny muscles and all of the sequences of swallowing. So that's why speech therapists do the dysphagia part of it, but the OTs can do the sensory.
The ADL component of it. So are you able to scoop and feed yourself? The daily living component of it is OT. Once it enters your mouth, that's when speech gets involved.
Okay, that's the thing, we have not been able to find a speech therapist
Yeah.
that specialized in feeding therapy or something
Yeah.
like that to be able to.
Well, we have six on our feeding team, and we have a food school. That's what we call it. It's a whole room just for feeding therapy. But yeah, just one component of the tongue. So then working on cued molar placement, and we'll do things like that, physically moving the food over to the side if we just go forward and back. So then that's when I was talking about the puzzle that you have to figure out with each specific kiddos, just individualized what's going on. That's when I moved to cued molar, and we really focus on that with safe foods for as long as we can in a safe feeder, meaning like a little mesh, looks like a little mesh thing. So then when I'm working on getting used to the food moving to the side and not our tongue just moving it back, that's what we work on until we get that step safe. Then we trial without the safe feeder and with real food, right.
What have you guys seen when it comes to therapy from severe dysphagia to kind of, how long does it kind of take to be able to move, or is it something that is reversible, they can get to eating and swallowing and chewing and all of that based on her even diagnosis specifically? Yeah, every kiddo is so different, but we definitely have good prognosis at our clinic for even severe dysphagia, helping them feed orally still. When we strengthen, I would say that we would want to give it, especially with NBIA, extra extended time. Normally, I would say that at 6 months we should check in on progress and see if we need to change any of the plans or the goals, but I would give more time with NBIA kiddos and a year and more. Yeah, it's, if you need to, you need to know in your head, that's fair.
We've been successful at getting maybe 3 off a button.
Yeah. Because that's what we're trying to prevent, because if it doesn't work, we'll leave it on because of the, question we have to
Put the,
consider
yeah.
a G2 or
Yep.
something like that.
Yeah. Or syringe feeding. We've gotten maybe 3 or 4 kiddos who
off syringe.
Syringe feed, and we've gotten them now to a diet
Yeah.
of at least 10.
Yep. All right. Any other questions?
Yeah, good question.
You're welcome. Yeah. Any other questions for anybody? Yes.
So our daughter can feed herself, but
Oh, good.
if she would have a basket of rolls in front of her, she'd stuff her mouth full.
Yes.
So what kind of strategies would you suggest?
Well, the overstuffing can come from around 3 different reasons, so I would want to know the reason behind it. Sometimes it's just the oral awareness we talked about, that she isn't sure where her cheeks are, where her tongue is, and she's having a hard time even knowing that it's there. And so we know we're taking a bite and we know that it's this big, but she might just be putting it all in because she doesn't have that perception of how big it is. And then there's another of the jaw strength might be weak, so we would target that jaw strength. And like Michelle said about the cued molar placement, we would want to start us placing things on their back molar so that they can practice that jaw strength. And we do this with things that are tough to chew, like dried fruit and carrots and jerky and beef sticks and celery, things like that, to practice that strength of chewing. Twizzlers, to practice the strength.
Or the flip coin, under responsive. So we really crave a lot of input. So either we're under and I'm not really sure it's there, or I love that feeling, like bring it in there. Do you have an idea of what of those is with your
I sort of feel like she doesn't know she's got it all
in there?
I mean, she could be herself and do most things. I just avoid things that would be choking.
Yeah.
She can chew carrots or, or she'll pick up the whole
Right.
carrot and chomp on it.
Yeah. So with that one, I would say the increased sensory awareness. So we have what's called a Z-Vibe. It looks like a pen, kind of, but on the edge, it has different things you can screw on and off then it vibrates when you turn it. So for parents at home, we suggest a vibrating toothbrush. If you don't have a Z-Vibe, they also sell Z-Vibes on Amazon. They're like $17. And you go right in on the cheeks, like in the inner cheek, and you just wake up that specific part that you're trying to increase the awareness on, and then we eat afterwards. So when you have the food in there, you can extra feel it, like, okay.
Yeah. And I would say extended amount of time again, like I would do a minute each cheek to really wake it up before we feed. And that is a good bit of time. When you're counting, you're like, this is a long time. So, that's where we take the opportunity to sing and do fun things. But I would do a minute each cheek with vibration.
And the speech. And then I always encourage parents to do it to yourself, because I think once after you've done that, I mean, it makes sense on paper, but once you have experienced that feeling, you're like, oh, okay, like your face gets buzzy, and yeah, you feel everything a lot. Like it's a big wake up. So I highly encourage our parents to, like, I know this seems silly, but I want you to do it, please, as well, just so you have the idea of what's going on.
Continuation is, she will drool, but it's more the saliva is cool and then the tip flow.
Yeah.
So is that sort of tied into this lack of awareness?
Definitely.
Yeah.
Definitely. Especially if we don't have awareness to our lips to close them. So she might just be open. And then not know that the drool is right there, so she tilts forward, rather than we know that, okay, we're feeling a lot of secretion right there, we're gonna swallow.
And then waking up the tongue, so when it's pulled minimally, that we initiate a swallow. So we might do the Z-Vibe on just that front part of the tongue where it's pooling before it got to the front, before that. So like, let's back up the steps when it was just a little bit of saliva. What part of that do I need to wake up? So I'm not waiting until it's pulled at the front and I have to, bend over. And then also, let's just strengthen that tongue while we're at it, because it's all different pieces of this big puzzle with every specific problem.
Yep.
She's got the motor control to make her mouth as small as can be when we want to put the electric toothbrush in.
Of course.
She's got that big Zucan smile.
Yeah.
I love that.
Yeah.
One other question was, when you were talking about the heavy work, what would you suggest for people that are my daughter's not, like someone in a wheelchair that's not able to get up and do all those things?
I would say, honestly, just holding things that are heavy, like
Weighted bean bags, we have
weighted blankets, weighted lap pads, things like that, just placing them on their lap, seeing if they would, if they have the motor control to reach it and give it back to you and take it back and forth, or even throwing a little bit of a heavier ball. We have little half-pound balls, 2-pound balls, 1-pound balls that, just holding it, that kind of will even wake up if you're just holding it in your hands, and it'll wake up your musculature. And then same with on the lap as well, just having something heavy can also be heavy work.
Yeah, and during summer, anything aquatic. Yeah, they're weightless, and so in the water, you're moving so many muscles that you don't just get the same opportunity to move in other components. So aquatic, feeding therapy right after aquatic is summer. Yeah.
Yeah.
Good question, though. Or even if we can't do wall push-ups, you be the wall, high fives, and just give a little bit of resistance back.
Patty cake is always
Mhm.
fun, and then they have to cross midline too, which
Yeah.
is another
Whole child.
whole approach.
The posture is interesting. I'm gonna have to look at posture.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And once again, what I tell parents is, I'm going to give you a snack and I want you to imitate her posture and eat. And you feel how that feels, and it's like, oh, wow. And it's just the increased awareness of that. It just, okay, that makes sense.
You would never think of it looking, but then when you do it yourself, you're like, oh, wow.
Oh, yeah.
Like, I do challenge you to go home and just, like, hold your feet up off the floor when you're sitting on a chair and try to eat anything. And it's hard.
It's harder. So we want to set them up to best success.
Yeah.
And so I don't want any other ancillary thing, giving them any more difficulty. So that is the 90-90-90. Good questions.
Yeah.
Yes, ma'am.
What about pocketing? Things like pocketing the food,
Is she taking a bite first or just overstuffing as well?
I'm having to feed her now.
You're feeding her and then she's, okay. So that's
Ti-
similar.
Yeah,
oral
similar to the
awareness.
oral. Yeah, usually they pocket when they're tired. Like I just need a little break from chewing. That's usually my pocketers are from tiring.
Or if it's a puree, like if it's an applesauce or a soup, that base of tongue
Yeah.
fatigue. So that's where I would do straws and things like that to do the tongue retraction activities, bring her tongue back, or his, and practice that strength and endurance of keeping the tongue back because it might just be hard with the tongue strength as well.
Yeah. So I would do a lot of the 1 minute Z vibe where, is it he or she? Where she pockets. And then you can also facilitate your own outside stimulation if you're feeling a pocket. Like, hey,
Yeah, and if you don't have the vibration or like a toothbrush yet, I do taps on the outside of the cheeks too for a really long time. Just light little baby taps going up and down right before feeding to bring awareness even on the outside. It's helpful. One step down from inside vibration, but still helpful.
Yeah.
Another thing I'd be interested in is tongue range of motion. Can she get her tongue to her molar?
I think, sometimes she'll have a piece of food just right here, and
She's trying, huh?
it's not, and she can't get her tongue
Yeah.
over there, or, I'm contemplating pureeing her food at this point, but I don't know.
Yeah.
And you might want to start with some mechanical soft and then maybe supplement with puree so she's still strengthening.
Yeah.
And then I would highly recommend that you do, we call it mouth gymnastics at Open Door, but do mouth gymnastics during the day, strengthening the musculature when it's not feeding time and with non-food items like the chewy tube to really work out that muscle and get it stronger so when it is feeding time, we've got a little bit better. Our mouth workouts.
I have lots of ideas in my head about it because I also do think the hard munchables would be helpful, like we talked about the carrots and the celery, dried beef sticks, things like that, that are, especially beef sticks are a big taste, and putting them on their molar, kids, we even naturally will put our tongue to the side if something's presented at our molar.
Right.
So seeing if she can move her tongue to the side if you put something that's kind of big in there.
Bite that off.
We don't, the goal of hard munchables is not to bite it off. But when they have teeth, they can, so you just have to be careful about holding it. Sometimes I'll put my thumb in their cheek so they can't swallow, because you can't swallow if your mouth is open, so.
She almost bit my finger off one time, so I
Yeah.
know she can bite.
It's an occupational hazard. We get bitten a lot.
All the time.
That's okay. We're used to it.
Yeah.
So we might have time for maybe one more question, and we're just out of time.
And if you have a chicken nugget, that's what I love to call my kiddos. If you have a chicken nugget who's just not ready for that big feeling in their mouth of a Z vibe, like Miss Loren said, that's when you move it to the outside. And some of them are not even ready for that. That's when you move it to the arms and legs, and then you work up. You work up to the body. So if they're not accepting of that, then don't eliminate the Z vibe. Then you just scale it down. Scale it down. And over time, we'll get it there eventually. You'll get it in the mouth.
We can stay if you have any other questions too and come chat with us. I can stay. Thank you.